The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
You can't do it, Vanessa. You cannot hack into the Nevada voting machine system. You just can't do it.
Tonight on Politics Now, keeping your ballot safe. The head of the Las Vegas FBI field office tells us about security for Election Day. Nevadans love to vote early, how a pandemic and mail-in ballots are all affecting voter turnout this year. Plus,
meet Nicole Cannizzaro. Cannizzaro wrote legislation to raise her own pay by 150%.
an effort by Republicans to unseat State Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now.
Securing the November election. Thank you for joining us here on Politics Now. I'm John Langler. We are 10 days away from Election Day. This week, the FBI announced efforts by Iran and Russia to influence the election. Election officials and law enforcement say measures are in place to prevent problems. The I-Team's Vanessa Murphy talked with the local head of the FBI.
Nevada voters may be dropping off their mail-in ballots at early voting locations like this one or casting their ballots at these locations. And there's a lot of misinformation floating around about this election. The head of the local FBI office says voters should feel confident, though, and any issues will be investigated.
Because of the robust protections for voting here in Nevada, it's really hard to get away with anything.
President Donald Trump continuously questions the integrity of the November election, even saying Governor Steve Sisolak will steal it. One concern, mail-in ballots. Election officials insist signature verification helps eliminate voter fraud.
Is it widespread in Nevada?
I wouldn't say it's widespread. I would say that we get reports every year, every election cycle, of potential voter fraud situations, and we investigate them thoroughly, and we hold the people, if it's proven, then we hold them accountable through the U.S. Attorney's Office.
As the I-Team has reported, data reveals only 2 votes in Nevada have been cast illegally since 2008. Rouse says the FBI will investigate any allegations of fraud or voter intimidation now and on November 3rd. He also tells the I-Team he has confidence in the voting machines since they are not part of a network and have no internet connection.
Were there attempts to hack into our system here?
You can't do it, Vanessa. You cannot hack into the Nevada voting machine system. You just can't do it.
100%.
You would have to go machine by machine, and that is just not feasible.
What is a concern? Interference from abroad.
Foreign adversaries from multiple countries are keen on undermining people's confidence in the election. And so they do that utilizing social media, the internet, and they put out, sometimes it appears to be legitimate stories, or they put out memes that people glom onto that make them think that the election's somehow going to be illegitimate.
President Trump has suggested voting twice by mail and in person to test this system. Rouse says don't do that. It's a crime. Vanessa Murphy, 8 News Now.
Statewide, early and mail-in voting has been underway for 2 weeks. Here in Clark County through Thursday, there were 168,000 people who voted early. There's still another week of in-person early voting. 162,000 mail-in ballots have been received in Clark County, where Democrats have a 3-to-1 advantage. In-person votes here have been split about 50-50. There's a slight 3,000 vote lead for Republicans. So far, about 58,000 more Democrats than Republicans have voted in Clark County. All right, so let's take a little bit of a look at how that compares historically to early voting here in Clark County. So here's a look at a chart here. And in Clark County, it's been more than half of the turnout, and it's gone up every year. You can see here from 1996 all the way to 2016 here, the trend going way up. And it's been like that, as you can see, from 96 up to 2016. Almost 2/3 of our votes for the last few election cycles have been early votes. Clark County is disputing, meanwhile, an allegation it's not allowing ballot observers. The public has a legal right to observe the ballot counting process. President Trump and the Republican Party sent a letter to the Secretary of State, and it claims that election officials did not allow them to observe the process. However, Clark County says it's gone above and beyond. It added the Trump campaign was allowed in, but were turned back because they tried to use a camera inside. It's against Nevada law to take pictures or videos where ballots are counted. Between potential legal challenges and threats of misinformation from foreign countries, there are voters, maybe you in particular, might be concerned about the election. We spoke with David Becker. He's the executive director and founder of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and he's a CBS News contributor.
We spoke with the USC, Election Cybersecurity Initiative, and what they were talking about, and maybe you would agree, is the actual process of voting and the ballot itself is secure. It's the misinformation that is, or the information that is insecure. But I guess the question is, though, is it illegal? Is it against the law to put out misinformation, especially since voter information, as you point out, is publicly available?
So, of course, it can be against the law to spread disinformation about the election process. Certainly, there are international laws that govern this as well, and we should be very wary when someone like Russia or Iran tries to attack our sovereignty by interfering in our elections. And that's exactly right. The goal of these adversaries is not necessarily to change votes. That's almost impossible to do in an undetected way. We've not seen any evidence of that whatsoever. But what they can get us to do is to distrust our own election process, to delegitimize the election itself, to reduce voter confidence, which will delegitimize our elected leaders and weaken our democracy. And the best thing we can do as American voters is to show up in record numbers. There's nothing Vladimir Putin would hate more than to see record voter turnout in the United States in this upcoming election.
I get the sensation when election day is over, that doesn't mean it's going to stop. That doesn't mean the legal challenges to the election necessarily go away and the misinformation goes away. What are you seeing from your point of view with regards to after November 3rd and law?
So I think we're very likely to know the result of the presidential election either by Wednesday morning or a day or two after that, because of the very high turnout that we're likely to see. The more people who turn out, the less likely we're going to have the really, really narrow margins. Where we get into a possible post-election litigation scenario is similar to 2000, where we've got one or two states that have essentially decided the presidency, and the margins in those states are razor thin. We remember in Florida in 2000, it was 537 votes. But if we get even 1% margins in states, that's actually a rather large margin. To my knowledge, there's never been an election result overturned, a statewide election result overturned in the United States, where there's been a 1,000-vote margin.
One thing you do not see on the ballot this year, competitive third-party candidates. UNLV political science professor Dan Lee says that's because of how polarized the two major political parties have become. I asked him to explain his theory.
I imagine it goes both ways. You talk about the potential for the libertarians to pull away from a more maybe right-leaning candidate, but there's also not as highly publicized a Green Party candidate either that could do the same to the left, no?
Right, no, that's exactly right. Well, so in Nevada, you don't even have that option because there's another hurdle for third-party candidates is the ballot access. So the Green Party was not able to gain ballot access in Nevada. They needed to collect around 10,000 signatures, which is relatively high compared to other states. But I think this actually highlights an important point about third parties is where third parties don't necessarily need to win elections to influence American politics. Right? So for instance, the Green Party, why is there a ceiling to the Green Party? So one reason is that the Democratic Party has co-opted environmental positions, right? They've kind of moved towards the left on the environment over the past couple of decades, and that's eating away at the support for Green Party candidates. But you see like how the Green Party influenced politics though. It pulled the Democratic Party to the left.
When you're talking about the Green New Deal, the Ocasio-Cortez, that sort of branch of the House of Representatives, that's a way to, and you're suggesting, placate to some extent to that element of the population.
Exactly. And I think what we're seeing more now is where these outsiders are trying to work their way through the major parties. They're not necessarily, so Bernie Sanders always ran for the House and Senate as an independent, But for the presidency, he chose to run through the Democratic Party to try to transform it. And in a lot of ways, he was successful. He pulled Clinton towards the left in 2016. He's kind of continued that trend to this current election cycle, actually changed some of the rules at the Democratic National Convention, like with the superdelegates. So he is actually transforming the Democratic Party. Likewise for Trump, an outsider, in a lot of ways, he and Perot are very similar. He decided to run through the Republican Party to transform that party for his political gain.
We have the entire discussion there about third-party candidates, if you'd like to see it, at 8newsnow.com. All right, so let's take a look now at a couple of the Nevada down-ballot races being hotly contested for November. State Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro is facing some very stiff competition from Republican April Becker for State Senate District 6. Becker has been running ads criticizing a legislative pay hike.
Meet Nicole Cannizzaro. Cannizzaro wrote legislation to raise her own pay by 150%.
All right, so that is an ad, obviously, and it refers to a Senate joint resolution in the 2019 legislative session. It would have created annual legislative sessions instead of every 2 years, and it also included a 150% pay raise. The bill never came up for a vote. Cannizzaro has been running ads, meanwhile, against Becker as well.
Becker's campaign is backed by politicians who would repeal Obamacare, dropping protection.
Canizzaro's ads have focused on Becker's opposition, as you hear there, to Obamacare, and highlighting Canizzaro's work in the Clark County District Attorney's Office. She is the first female Senate Majority Leader in Nevada history. Democrats hold a 40-32 voter registration advantage in District 6. There are 4 Clark County Commission seats up for grabs, but only one of them is expected to be close, and that is County Commission District C. That seat pits Republican Las Vegas Councilman Stavros Anthony against Democratic former Secretary of State Ross Miller. The seat is currently held by Larry Brown, who is terming out. The county commission right now, it's all Democrats. If Anthony wins, though, he'd be the first Republican on it since Bruce Woodbury left back in January of 2009. Anthony has vowed not to vote for any tax hikes. Miller says he's the right person to lead an economic recovery, and he wants to make a difference on the local level. You can watch interviews with those candidates and a whole lot more over at 8newsnow.com. Just look at the 2020 election interviews tab. 5 ballot questions and 5 potential changes to Nevada's Constitution.
That restores accountability, transparency, and oversight.
We're going to walk you through the ballot questions about the university system, same-sex marriage, pardons, voting, and renewable energy.
For your vote for Clark County Commissioner.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
There are 5 statewide ballot questions on your ballot this year, and these would make changes to Nevada's constitution. All 5 have either gone through the legislature or gotten required signatures, and they would take effect November 24th if they're passed. So we're going to go through all 5 of those measures. 8 News Now anchor Brian Loftus starts with question 1.
Ballot question 1 is probably the most confusing one. It would remove the Board of Regents from the state constitution. The Board of Regents oversees Nevada's university system. Critics say this has allowed the Board of Regents to operate without any oversight from the legislature. Former Assemblyman Elliot Anderson wrote question 1.
It restores accountability, transparency, and oversight. You know, right now, Nevada spends $1.2 billion on higher ed, but without any real oversight on how that money is spent.
It would also let the legislature create new rules and laws overseeing Nevada's higher education system.
It's really, really important for Nevada and for our economy that our higher ed system can be nimble to answer the issues that we need to deal with.
Question 1 has some opposition from current members of the Board of Regents, but the argument against the passage on the Secretary of State's website says question 1 is nothing but the legislature trying to gain more power and control, and it would only serve to add political pressures to a governance system that is serving this state well. Brian Loftus, 8 News Now.
And up next, question 2, dealing with same-sex marriage. It would remove language from the Nevada Constitution, which says marriage is between a man and a woman. Same-sex marriage is already legal nationwide, of course, and in Nevada because of a Supreme Court decision by the Supreme Court of the U.S. back in 2015. Passing question 2 would not change marriage at all. Andre Wade with the Silver State Equality Group says it's about removing unenforceable discriminatory language.
So removing that language by voting yes on question 2 will uphold civil rights and uphold equality here in the state of Nevada, which we know that we stand for.
An opposition statement posted in the Secretary of State's Digest calls the measure unnecessary and calls domestic partnerships a viable option for same-sex couples in Nevada. Meanwhile, question 3 deals with the Pardons Board. The board gets about 15 requests for pardons a year. Brian Loftus explains the changes the measure would create.
Question 3 deals with the State Pardons Board and the power it has. So first, what does the Pardons Board do? It does not erase a conviction, but it will restore certain rights to a pardoned felon, such as serving on a jury and gun ownership. Right now, the Pardons Board is made up of the governor, the attorney general, and the Supreme Court justices. Added to the state constitution, require the board to meet quarterly, allow anyone on the board to bring up items for discussion. Right now, just the governor can do that. Removes a requirement for the governor to vote yes for a pardon to be granted. That had effectively served as a veto. The argument for is the board will meet more frequently and timely, and a pardon would not just be on the whims of the governor. The argument against is that the board would meet even if there are not qualified applicants, and questioning why we would take away the veto power of the governor when they have it over bills from the legislature.
Now, there is no question 5, so the last 2 ballot questions are 4 and 6. Both would take something that's already in state law and enshrine it in the Constitution. Question 4 puts the voters' Bill of Rights in the state constitution and includes guarantees like the ability to vote without being intimidated, threatened, or coerced, being allowed to vote on Election Day if you're in line before the polls close, and requesting assistance with voting if necessary. Ballot question 6 puts the 50 by 30 renewable energy portfolio standard in the state constitution. That would require 50% of Nevada's energy come from renewable resources by 2030. If approved, all these measures would go into the Constitution on November 24th. Coming up next on Politics Now, confirming the next Supreme Court justice. Coming up next, when a vote on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination is expected to happen next week. Plus,
Americans could soon get more financial help, including more stimulus checks. That's if the White House and Democrats can work out their differences. I'm Alexandra Limon in Washington with the details.
satellite provider.
You're watching Politics Now.
Well, the U.S. Senate now gearing up to confirm President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. She passed the Senate Judiciary Committee on Thursday. Democrats boycotted the vote, but Republicans were able to pass it anyway. A final vote of the full Senate on her confirmation is expected on Monday. A deal on another coronavirus relief package could be within reach. Both sides on Capitol Hill say a deal is possible. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the massive stimulus package would send more checks to Americans, provide money to safely reopen schools, and fund additional COVID-19 testing and treatment. Joining us now to talk about the prospects of a new economic relief package in our Washington, D.C. bureau, we have Alexandra Limon from Washington, D.C. Alex, good to see you. Let's talk about what's happening with what's called the skinny relief bill now working its way through the Senate.
The Senate Republicans actually tried to call for a vote on it earlier this week, and it's really a slimmed down version, as the name implies, of the relief package. It would have included about $500 billion in aid, but it basically went nowhere quickly. It needed 60 votes to get through the Senate, and it did not get that. And Democrats basically said they're unwilling to support a skinny bill because it's just too skinny for them. It doesn't include enough relief and enough of the help that they want. So that went nowhere. Senate Republicans also tried to separately call for a vote for more PPP funding, those small business loans that have been very popular, but that also was not approved.
Where are negotiations? Is there a stalemate between both houses? Is there a stalemate between all the parties involved here?
It's interesting because I feel like we've been through this time and time again, but just this week we heard both Speaker Pelosi and the White House saying that they're very optimistic, that they feel they're very close to a deal that could be hashed out any day now. There's still a lot of differences that they can't agree on, and one of the big ones is whether to include money for state and local governments. So again, this could be one of the big hiccups that prevents this deal from getting passed and getting approved by at least the House and the White House. Another thing is that protection for businesses if they face any coronavirus related lawsuits. That's another major point of disagreement between both sides. So, we'll have to see what happens, but they're saying they hope they can reach a deal in a matter of days. We'll see whether they can actually get the Senate Republicans on board, though.
And that was Alexandra Limon from Washington, D.C. More politics.
On 2020 Atlas Cross Sport models.
Welcome back to Politics Now. Hey, if you check out 8newsnow.com, check out the Election 101 tab there. You see it right there. Our investigative team did an in-depth look at the things you need to know on your ballot about taking part in the election, security, all sorts of issues that maybe you have questions about to take part in the November election. Just head to 8newsnow.com, look for Election 101. You'll get all the details that you need to take part. We hope you check it out. Okay, now in What to Watch, we're keeping an eye on the early voting totals, and that should be next week. Traditionally, Democrats have had a voter advantage in early voting, and Republicans have done better on Election Day. Coupling that with complaints from President Trump and the Republican Party about mail-in voting, we are watching to see if Republicans make up some of the advantage during in-person voting during the next week. Don't forget, we have put all of the interviews that we have with all of the candidates that are running for offices across Nevada over at 8newsnow.com. It is under the 2020 Election Interviews tab. Check them out before you vote. Sit down with your ballot, look at the interviews, see what you need to see, and remember to take part in the election. Election Day, as you may know by now, is November 3rd. And again, that Election 101 section of the website is available. It has all the other questions, not just about the candidates, but about the process itself. Thank you for watching Politics Now. We'll see you next week. Take care.